Hello, everyone. I'm the third presenter, so my name is Gareth Thomas. So in addition to being the host today, I'm also going to talk a little bit about what's new in MATLAB 2020b. Now, there's a couple of ways of doing this. So I could kind of tell you that I read all the release notes and I'm very passionate about it, but it turns out that the Mathworks, they actually condense all the thousands of things that they push out in every new release in a couple of videos. So I want to play two videos with you, which I think do a good job on describing some of these new things. And then I'm going to take a deeper dive into some of these things. Okay, so bear with me. They're two marketing videos just because I think they do a really good job and I don't think I can reproduce it as quickly. And I think these things are worth seeing. Okay, so here's what's new in MATLAB 2020b.
Release 2020b offers hundreds of new and updated features and functions, along with exciting new products. LiDAR Toolbox provides algorithms, functions, and apps for designing, analyzing, and testing LiDAR processing systems. UAV Toolbox provides tools and reference applications for designing, simulating, testing, and deploying unmanned aerial vehicle and drone applications. You can now prototype and implement deep learning networks on FPGAs and SoCs with Deep Learning HDL Toolbox. And the new Roadrunner family of products enables engineers to create 3D scenes and road networks for automated driving simulation. In 20B, working with graphics and apps in MATLAB just got easier. You can now visualize data with new bubble and swarm charts, diff and merge app designer apps, and add custom figure icons and components to your MATLAB apps. You'll find optimizing machine learning models easier as well. AutoML now selects the best performing model and optimizes its hyperparameters in one step. With Experiment Manager, you can now run multiple trials of an experiment in parallel. You can also use Bayesian optimization to determine the best combination of hyperparameters for an experiment. This is an example of training a semantic segmentation network using Deep Network Designer. You can design the network, visualize the dataset, and set options and train the network, all in one app. Features like Lime can help explain the reasons behind predictions made by the deep learning networks. Use GPU Coder to accelerate Simulink models, including deep learning networks and any pre- and post-processing. Then generate CUDA code to deploy to NVIDIA GPUs, such as the Jetson and Drive platforms. Release 2020b includes lots of new features in Simulink too. If you have Simulink, the following licenses will get you access to Simulink online. Just go to matlab.mathworks.com, sign into your Mathworks account, and open Simulink. These products are also supported. In Stateflow, gain an understanding of what states, transitions, and functions your system spends most of its time in during different scenarios using the Activity Profiler. Using System Composer, you can now create functional, logical, and physical models of your system. Allocate or map these functions to logical components, then allocate the logical components to physical elements. With Simscape, the new stiffness analysis lets you identify components in your Simscape model that are numerically stiff. You can navigate directly to the block and investigate options to accelerate your simulation. With the new model testing dashboard in Simulink Check, you can assess the quality and completeness of your requirements-based testing to comply with industry standards. Lastly, Simulink Realtime now has 64-bit POSIX-compliant RTOS designed to meet real-time application requirements on SpeedGoat target machines. There's plenty more in this latest release. To find out what else is new, go to mathworks.com and download 20b today.
So that's a whirlwind of capabilities and functionalities, right? So, but this was, I think, more centered towards what's new in the MATLAB side of the family. I think it's also just as important because I think quite a few of you on the line are actually strong Simulink users. I wanted to quickly show you also a second video of what's new in Simulink. So bear with me on this.
Release 2020b includes lots of new features in Simulink. Let's look at some of the highlights. You can now view, edit, and simulate Simulink models through your web browser with Simulink Online. No downloads or installation needed. If you have Simulink, the following licenses will get you access to Simulink Online. Just go to matlab.mathworks.com, sign into your Mathworks account, and open Simulink. These products are also supported. In 20b, you can automate the process of merging branches that have changes in different subsystems file using the MATLAB comparison tool. This auto-merge function helps to further automate workflows like continuous integration. Simply configure your source control tool to use the MATLAB comparison tool for differencing and merging. Projects continue to simplify the way you share your work. You can now export an entire project and all its files to a previous MATLAB release with just one function. Need to share a protected model with colleagues and suppliers? You can do it by sharing just one project file that contains all artifacts, like test harnesses, data dictionaries, all the things you need to open and simulate the protected model. We added support for the half-precision data type in Simulink. You can design, simulate, and generate C and HDL code for half-precision systems. This means you can save memory when you deploy algorithms to embedded platforms like microcontrollers and FPGAs. And if you work with referenced models, code generation for model hierarchies is up to 2 times faster than in previous releases. That's because by default, the simulation targets for referenced models are excluded from the code generation process, so you can get to your end goal quicker. To start using these features and more, download 20b today.
So I think this is a powerful couple of videos from the Mathworks. So this is not about it, but I think we all share a common passion for MATLAB. And as a result, it's kind of hard to summarize all the thousands of people's work over 6 months of what they've done. But at a high level, I wanted to kind of call out a few things which are my personal favorites, which is I think it's important to call out that they've got 4 new toolboxes. They've had 19 major toolbox updates. And if you only look at MATLAB alone, there's 224 release notes just in MATLAB, right? So Mathworks, I think, has got about 117 products now. So it's actually quite a mammoth task to understand and validate what it means for each and every one of us of what does the new release have. I think there's much more to Mathworks and MATLAB than most people are aware of, and this is a way to call it out. So for today's presentation, given the theme of today is a release party, so we're celebrating the fact that there is a new release, I just wanted to call out that, when there's a major release, that means typically there's something fundamentally important worth calling out. These are the toolboxes that had major releases this release, and these are the new ones. So I did the LiDAR Toolbox, Deep Learning HDL, the Roadrunner Scene Builder, which is interesting, different visualization for roads, and the UAV Toolbox. The other thing which I think is interesting is Simulink Online. So it's great to see it live. I think you should try it at home, log on, see what you think about it. It's just a major breakthrough, I think, for the Mathworks to put Simulink Online. So I was kind of happy when I saw that. The other thing that I wanted to piggyback, so I created this slide while Kirsten and Michael were presenting, is there's all these on-ramps, these cool free things. So if people are trying to figure out how to learn tools, these free on-ramps are super powerful. And I think there are 2 new ones that came out recently, which is the image processing on-ramp and the control design on-ramp with Simulink. And I think the fact that Simulink is online, it is empowering these on-ramps, so people can take these courses and learn the tools and explore it in a more productive way. So this might be useful for your peers who maybe are not as familiar as MATLAB as some of you are. So that being said, that's a bit of the marketing, right? So the way I kind of look at this, it's hard to summarize all the cool features. So given that MATLAB is used in different industries and people have different levels of knowledge and so forth, so it's hard to say what is important or not per industry or per toolbox. The way that I kind of see the world is I classify MATLAB users into 4 large categories. So there's the newbie. This is the person who's just starting MATLAB. Then there's the casual user who uses MATLAB every now and again. Then we have the proficient user, which uses MATLAB almost every day of his or her life. And then there's the developer whose actually whole purpose is building tools for other people to leverage inside the Mathworks ecosystem. Now, I think if you split it up into these 4 categories, it's easier to digest what is new. And the rest of my talk is I'm going to be showing my personal 4 favorites in each of these categories, based on pure MATLAB, let alone the other 116 toolboxes. And I think MATLAB is because we use it a lot. This is important to know that there's some cool things that appeared. But you know, this is a release party. So before we kind of go into 20B, I want to talk a little bit about what I presented in 20A. So we organize these MATLAB coders on a regular basis. And the last time we had an online event, we explored what was new in 20A. And this is just a recap in the same categories. So for newbies, there was the new live tasks. MATLAB in general was faster. The Simulink port location changed. The MATLAB documentation also improved. For casual users, there's the box chart, which was new in basic MATLAB, the export graphics and the copy graphics, the improved tiled layout, and the app designer improved its performance. I think leading up to this, Joris called out the profiler flame graphs for the new profiler in MATLAB. That was a nice one for proficient users. Also, Simulink port name propagation kicked in, as well as the new Simulink profiler. It's also true that text scan, the read, import, hexadecimal, and binary littles also became better and was new. For developers, I think there's really a few things that came out. So there's the Simulink compiler that you can compile and deploy Simulink models in combination with the MATLAB web app server, so people can access Simulink models via their browser. And if you're developing apps, the app testing supported mouse selection as part of their unit testing framework. And there was a new dependency analyzer. So those are some of the things that I personally thought were super cool in 20A. And I would like to piggyback off this and show some examples of my cool favorite features in 20B, okay? So let's talk a little bit about 20B. Same framework, the newbies, casual users, proficient users, and developers. I'm going to jump into MATLAB and I'm going to show these things one by one, okay? So for 20B, my favorite things are the bubble charts, color map editor, new markers for plots, and the live editor images. So let me go to MATLAB and show you what I'm talking about, okay? So I should also turn on my camera so you can see me. So this is MATLAB. We're all familiar with this. And I have here a live script for newbies, okay? And I have 4 live scripts for my newbies, casual users, proficient, and so forth. And what I'm going to walk you through is, so I have the table of contents, and I'm going to show you what I kind of like. So the first one is the graphics, the bubble charts, the swarm, the colored box plot. These are cool things that have emerged. I like the fact that with bubble charts and the bubble charts 3D, you can actually visualize things differently. So this has been a bit of a pain if you, in the past, if you haven't been able to, if you've been wanting to express data like this. So you can see here, 2D view, a 3D view, and you can change the color and sizes. I think that's pretty cool. The other thing that I kind of like is the color editor. So the color map editor. So this has existed for quite a while, but there's a new one, a new user interface, I should say, which makes it a little bit slicker and easier. So let's kind of check it out. So let's load some MRI data, and you can see it here. And let's do this. Pop it out. Open it up here, and you can use the color map editor command, but you can also use tools or edit, and there's the color map. Okay, so there's a new user interface which just makes life a little bit easier to kind of change this. So Mathworks has also got a few new colors maps. So the Perula is designed for, I guess, for the colorblind is part of the reason why it's used. But there are other ones which are kind of cool here, and you can look at maybe like the heart or different ones, and you can actually control this. So I kind of like this because it's got a easier user interface just to kind of like change the colors that you have, right? So I mean, this is not super special, but it's just kind of like one of those nice to haves that I kind of get a kick out of, which I wanted to share with you. So the new color map editor. And the reason why I'm showing you this quickly is at the end, I'm going to ask you to pick your favorite. So if you do see something that you really do like, take note of it, and we'll do a little vote at the end to see which are the favorite and the coolest new things in MATLAB. Then there's another one, which is the plotting. So so the plot command is probably going to be the most popular command in MATLAB. Anybody who's used it must have typed plot I don't know how many times. It's kind of cool to see if there's new things to the plot command. It's nice to call out. So there's a couple of new markers, which I kind of think is interesting, which I just wanted to show. So it's the vertical bar and the underscore, which is kind of nice. And then the other thing that is really simple, and this is again for newbies, is actually it's easier to change the size of images now. So I know this seems like a very trivial thing, but if you do kind of iterate towards sharing live scripts with others, being able to change the image size is actually kind of convenient and nice. So I kind of like that. These are my favorite tips around for newbies. Now, if I kind of do the same thing for casual users, so let me go to my casual user folder, and I have my live script here. There's a couple of things that I wanted to call out, and I think it's nice to say that there are a few things that I really like, which are the live editor has got something called live tasks. So if you go here, insert, you not only have controls, right? You have your sliders and so forth, but you also have tasks. And it's kind of cool to see that the Mathworks has been evolving this. And I wanted to call out a few of them, which kind of came out in 20B. So the one that I triggered my interest the most is the optimize. So I've inserted the optimize task here. And the idea here is it's a user interface embedded in the live editor, which you can click and choose different things and choose different types of optimization problems, if it's linear or choosing your objectives and putting different constraints. You can specify your different solver, and I've already done this up front, but it's kind of interesting because you can select the problem, the data, the bounds, all of these things, which if you're not really used to it, it's kind of painful to get your head around. And at the bottom of my live script, this was generated automatically. So I'm going to be using Assignex as a function. And I just think it's kind of cool because, you know, part of it is you can show and hide the code. So if you're proficient with MATLAB, you can kind of write this out. But if you want to do more a click and point thing, this is kind of a cool thing that I think is useful. Sorry, I was using the clean outlier data. One that I show here is the optimizing. So I think this is nice because ultimately it's not so difficult to get to this, but most of the time people struggle finding out what are the right options to configure, right? So let's run this because I think this is kind of a cool thing to show people, you know. So Mathworks is being known for optimizing, and it's kind of nice to see that they're making it easy for, I guess, casual users. The other thing that they have is this cleaning outlier data. So you can kind of add your data here, and it's the same thing that you have a little user interface, if you will, to kind of choose options. So there's the input data. I think you have removing or filling outliers. But I like the idea of choosing different algorithms that you can kind of explore this on your own because, you know, sometimes it's not so clear of how you should deal with these outliers and what you should do to the data, and it's possible to script an index into it. I just think this is kind of nice, and you can change your thresholds and it becomes a bit dynamic. So as you're changing these things that you can see on the right-hand side, things are running, and it's kind of cool to see what it visually looks like. And again, the same thing is you get to see the code that's behind it. So I kind of like these live tasks. I think this makes it easy for people who are not so familiar with the commands and the documentation. That brings me then to, I guess, another cool thing that I like is the read struct and write struct command. So let's look at this. I don't know if you've ever had this feeling that sometimes you have XML files. So let's look at this XML file. So it's music and it's an embedded or structured XML file. The question is how do you parse this and put it into MATLAB, right? So it's kind of cool that there's now a command which is called the read struct, and you just pass it the XML file. So let's kind of look at it, what S looks like, s.assemble, I should say, and it just kind of makes it easy to kind of see the data with tab completion, and I kind of think this is a nice way to do this. I mean, you could manually write it, but you know, it just takes time, and I think it's nice that the Mathworks has made this a bit easier for everybody. Another cool thing, which I kind of like, and I know it's really, really simple but useful, is the spreadsheet preserve format and auto width. So if you write a cell and you use the command write cell A to an Excel file. So if I show you my folder, I don't have anything. There's also something which is called preserve format. So you can have true or false here. So what happens is if you do false here, and if I open this outside MATLAB and I change open outside MATLAB. Hold on, wait for Excel to open up. You can change the colors of this, right? Now, if I save this, right, and if I overwrite this, if I have this false, what will happen is that the colors disappear, right? So what you can now do is preserve the format by putting this true. So I think that's a kind of nice thing if you're continuously reading, writing to Excel, and you want to keep the specific format and controlling the width of your columns. Because sometimes you'd open up Excel and you have to double click to make sure the column width is correct. They've just made it a bit easier. The other thing that I think is also kind of cool is the plot axis. They have something called padded and subtitles. So this is super simple, but very powerful. So this is a normal plot. And what we can do is we can, if you look closely, so let me make this a bit bigger for you guys to see this. If you do a plot command and you can see that the 1 and the -1, the axis is scaled to match perfectly. But actually sometimes what you want is to have it padded, right? So you want to give a bit of a distance, and then what we usually do is we write it out. It's just nice that there's a command axis there. And the other thing that I kind of like is there's a subtitle. So this has been something that I've wished for a long time. Now we can have subtitles on the plotting capability, which is kind of a cool thing. So these, I think, were my favorite things for casual users, which is the live editor, live tasks, the clean outlier data, the optimize. There's also the read struct and the write struct, spreadsheet preserving format and outer width, and the plots and axes are kind of cool. Now, I know we're kind of getting close to the end time, but I wanted to go over the proficient users and the developers because I think this is actually kind of useful. So let me go to my favorite features for proficient users. So let me open this up again. Again, I have my table of contents. So I should have maybe cleared the output, but I think you'll forgive me for this. The first thing I wanted to call out is there's this thing called patterns and extract. You can also export multiple live scripts at once. The GroupSummary with anonymous functions is now available, and UI tables can also control the width. So these are the 4 things I'm going to walk you through. So let's look at the patterns and extract. So anybody who's been using MATLAB for a while, and at a certain moment, there's always a need to use regular expressions. And regular expressions have existed, well-known technology, but I personally find them very painful to remember and understand what I want to do. So if I take, for example, this string, so it's a HTML tag, and I'm calling out VersionBay, and what I want to do is I want to just get the www.versionbay.com. So you could do it with regular expressions, and there are multiple ways of doing the same thing. But you can see here regular expression A, and I'm looking for www dot, and then I'm finding words or multiple words and .com. And then if you want to put that into a variable, you need to use tokens, and you need to put a little curly braces around brackets, and then you can get the word VersionBay. If you want to kind of get the www.versionbay, you need to put the curly braces around it here. So there's a slight difference putting the brackets here or there. So I mean, that's all kind of cool, and maybe you want to make it a bit more formal by having removing the www and the com, right? And you have the word separated with dots. So there's clearly room for improvement, and you can do lots of cool tricks with regular expressions, but I tend to find myself looking at this in the documentation left, right, and center. I mean, it does work, and there's a place in the world for this. But I do think what is nice is Mathworks has kind of come up with these patterns, and there's this thing called extract and pattern. So letter patterns is a command, and there's quite a lot of them that have kind of come up. So let's open up the documentation, and the idea is to replace the regular expressions with something which people can read a little bit better. So letter patterns n matches the text composed of exactly n letters. There's quite a few examples that you can kind of run through, but there's more than just if I scroll to the bottom, it's not just letter patterns. There's also alphanumeric, digit, character list patterns, and wildcards and white spaces. So these, I think, are the common use cases that you end up using regular expressions. So let me run this so you can see what's going on. See the letter patterns? You gave it the same string here, the a ref equals www.versionbay. what it's done is it kind of created cells, splitting it all up. So that's kind of nice. And what you can do is instead of using tokens, you use the command extract, and you give it the string and the pattern, and it extracts it nicely. But what's nice about this is the pattern can be a combination of strings and things, which makes it a little bit easier. So I personally find this a little bit easier to read than the one above. So maybe this is a personal preference, but I do think sharing code like this with others is a little bit easier. Then there's also something which is kind of cool, which is exporting multiple live scripts, right? So let me show you what this does. So often, sometimes people, what they have to do is you create these live scripts and use them as a form of documentation, and you can generate HTML or PDFs around this. But and usually you have to kind of create your script in MATLAB if you have multiple of these at once. So if you go to save, there's a new thing called export folder. And what's kind of cool is it can take all of my live scripts in this particular folder, and I'm going to extract it to another one, which is going to be export, and I can export all of my 4 live scripts at once to HTML, and I think that's kind of cool because it just saves me some time of writing out my my own personal script to do this. And it takes into account folder structure, and this is nice, right? Okay, so it's maybe not super duper fast, but it's still faster than maybe me writing a little MATLAB script to go through this. Bear with me as it executes all of the live scripts in the background, and once it's done, what you can see here is a new folder has appeared, and let me close here. You can see the export folder appeared here, and then you have newbies, and let's open it up. Let's open it outside MATLAB. And you can see here, this is my exported live script, which is kind of cool, right? I think this is a nice touch that Mathworks has. Very good. Then let me go back to my proficient example that I was going through. I think also the fact that GroupSummary now has anonymous functions, I think this is super cool. So maybe some of you are not so familiar with GroupSummary is. Let me just run this code. So I'm loading some data that comes with MATLAB, some patient data. I'm creating a table out of this. And with the GroupSummary, what you can do is get a summary on the groups of per gender. So there's a count, which is 53 female, 47 male in this particular data set. And what's cool now is you can actually add additional functions. So I'm adding the cross-correlation here, and I want to cross-correlate height with width and my systolic with my dialectic in a table. So let's look at this. And I think this is kind of, let me minimize this for a second. Right. So you can see here, you can have the group count, and then you can have the cross-correlation kicking in, and you can have additional fields coming in here. So this isn't supported out of the box. You can out of the box use maximum minimums, but if you wanted your own custom function, you weren't able to do it with the GroupSummary, and you'd have to write the code yourself. So I think that's a nice little touch. Another cool thing is the UI table. So let me look at this. So I have a little app that I have here, and let me run the example first, and then we can look at the code behind it. So this is a little app that I've generated and built. It's got a little table inside it. I'm loading some data. Same data as what I just used in the previous example, and I've got 2 buttons, and there's a thing which is called the fit. So you can actually now change the width in your UI tables, and I think that's pretty cool. So it's doing it based on the data itself, not the titles. You can kind of script things to fix that, but I thought this was a nice little touch. So maybe just for the proficient users on the call, let's kind of look at the code of what that looks like. It's not rocket science, but it's a new feature that I think makes life a little bit easier. So this is App Designer, the replacement of Guide. I am looking at the design view is what you get by default, and I'm looking at the code view. So I'm loading the patients in both cases. I understand this code could be a little bit more elegant, but I think for purpose of this demo, you kind of get it. That what I'm looking at is there's something here called the app.iu table, the column width, you can actually control the width of it, and you can choose something called fit. And this is something which is new in 20b. So it's a simple way to kind of just control the width of columns. Anyone who's been doing app designing will probably appreciate the beauty of this. So that's, I guess, for proficient users. Last but not least, I'd like to talk a little bit about the developers, and then we'll open it up as a bit of a voting system of what you guys like the most. So let's look at my favorite features for developers in 20b. So I know the video at the beginning showed a couple of cool things, but my personal favorites are the compare merge with apps. So if you make two different versions of an app, you can compare and merge them, which is kind of nice. App testing has got, the app testing framework is increased to dragging and context menu testing. There's a new command called the MATLAB release, which makes it easy to understand which release of the Mathworks you're using. And there are new function validators. I should say function argument validators here. So let's first look at these two apps. So I have here in my folder, I have an app and an app v2. So I understand maybe you put this under version control or something, but it's nice to see that the visdiff now works. So it's just because these apps, they're not M code, they're MLAPP, and it's a different format. And sometimes it's hard to kind of compare it. You'd have to unzip it and whatnot, so it's not so easy. So you have to configure in your version control system to use the Mathworks compare and visdiff commands if you want to compare apps. And it's nice now that you can start comparing things. And you know, it's kind of interesting because I created both of them from scratch, and I really just changed a button which has got a different property name, and you can actually see the spaces change and things like that, which I wasn't aware of. They were actually doing that. And you know, if you change the names of the buttons and the widgets that you're using, this gets updated. If you change the sizes, these are nice ways of comparing and merging things. So I think this is a kind of a cool thing. The other thing which I thought was really cool is the app testing framework. So you can actually test usability of your apps. So say someone clicks and drags, you want to test that capability in your unit testing when you develop an app. That's kind of a cool thing. So let me run this code, and you'll see a little dot, and you'll see that the chart is being dragged. So this is kind of 100% scripted, and I think that's really cool for developers, that you know, you can make your apps a little bit more user proof. And the way to do that is there's with the test case, and you can have you use the drag command here, which is powerful. The other thing quickly that I kind of like is the MATLAB release. So it's kind of funny. So I work for a company which is called VersionBay. So we're particularly familiar with versions and the gotchas, and we kind of like this a lot. But if you look at the version command that typically people use, you either use the version or the ver. This doesn't really help. I mean, this is 20b update 1, so I've already updated it. I think the MATLAB release is just kind of nicer and easier. So, you know, we ended up building something similar in-house, and it's nice to see that the Mathworks has done that as well. And finally, but not least, is there's the new function validator. So I think some of you know that, you know, and maybe it's best to show what this looks like. When you write a function here at the bottom, you can now validate the arguments that you're passing in, and there's a specific terminology, the way to do this. And Mathworks has just been adding a few new ones. So in this release, there's must be a, maybe must be vector, must be in range, must be file, must be folder. Some of these things are just painful to script and test and make your code more robust. And it's kind of cool that they've extended that. So let me just walk you through what this looks like. So my times 2, it takes the input, multiplies it by 2, and you know, if you're not careful, you can pass whatever, and MATLAB is very forgiving, and it will work nicely, right? Cool thing is it doesn't really work too well with strings, but that's okay. But this is your function, right? So then usually what happens is people end up writing a whole bunch of protective code to make this a little bit easier, and I'm going to show you an example of how you can validate your input arguments. And I'm going to be saying the input in argument, it can be any number of rows, it has to have 3 columns, and it must be a float, right? So when I run this now, so let me save it. When I run this now, you'll start seeing the errors appearing on the right, which are kind of interesting. it's interesting, this last one here is, did you see the explicit expansion kicking in here? That was kind of a gotcha that I thought I would share with you, that you still have to be careful of these things. If you use it with A, it will give me an error saying invalid argument property in must be of a floating point value, right? And the same thing for ABC. The possible with the 1 to 3, the random, that also works nicely, and the text, it also fails. And maybe just to kind of show you a more natural case without that implicit expansion kicking in, I just wanted to show you by saying the input has to be one row, as many columns as you like, it has to be float, and then you can kind of see it gives you 1. It errors out on the right hand side because it's a char, and then it will also work nicely here. Yep, and on the random 3 by 3, it gives an error. So this kind of protective code, I think, is particularly useful. So that being said, as I know I've spoken a lot, these are just some of my favorite things that I think are pretty cool in the new version. Just to maybe summarize, for newbies, it was the bubble chart, the color map editor, new markers for the plot, live editor image resizing. For the casual user was the live tasks, optimizing and also optimizing the camera. You can clean your outliers, read struct, write struct, spreadsheet to preserve the format and the outer format and the width. For proficient users, I like the patterns in the extract. I think it's nice to be able to export multiple live scripts, anonymous functions with the GroupSummary command, and the UI table with an automatic width. For developers, I also showed the compare and merge apps, the app testing framework, the drag in the context menu, MATLAB release, and the new function argument validators, which kind of kicked in. So I know this is a whirlwind and it's kind of